All right. Good morning and welcome everyone to our first Workforce Wednesday panel to really focus on the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind project, as well as the hiring opportunities and the vision for moving forward with that. I am very glad to be able to move forward with the Workforce Wednesdays in a collaboration with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council and the Hampton Roads Alliance. As we mentioned during the last Friday forum, we will begin collaborating together and sharing Workforce Wednesdays and the Friday forum. So keep an eye out as we move forward with these programs into 2023 so you can stay abreast of the activity and around the project as far as announcements and opportunities to engage with contractors and subcontractors moving forward. First off, what we'd like to do is go and complete a round of introductions of our panelists. I'll start. I'm John Larson with Dominion Energy, Director of Public Policy and Economic Development, and look forward to sharing some information today on the Virginia Clean Economy Act and activities that Dominion Energy has undertaken around that. Next, I'll move to Jeff Tingley and ask that he introduce himself.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for joining this morning. My name is Jeff Tingley. I'm Head of Strategy and Market Development for the Xodus Group. Xodus is a worldwide energy consulting firm with headquarters in Aberdeen, Scotland, with offices in Boston, Providence, Houston, and the Middle East, Australia, and throughout Europe. We were fortunate enough to work with Dominion and Hampton Roads on doing a supply chain and workforce study earlier in the year, and I'll be thrilled to be sharing some of the workforce elements of that study. So, John, thank you very much for having me this morning.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Vernon, if you want to introduce yourself with the Hampton Roads Alliance.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the first Workforce Wednesday. My name is Vernon Tillich. I am with the Hampton Roads Alliance. I am responsible for helping to develop an outreach strategy and advocacy efforts for offshore wind here in Hampton Roads on behalf of the Hampton Roads Alliance. Hampton Roads Alliance, as many of you all may know, is a regional economic development authority here in Hampton Roads. And we're working closely with Dominion and other partners for this offshore wind project here in Hampton Roads.
Thank you. Thank you, Vernon. And Whitney Lester has kindly stepped in for his colleague, Mr. Steve Cook, this morning. So Whitney, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, John. My name is Whitney Lester. I'm with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, the regional workforce development organization for all of Southeastern Virginia. And my role is Senior Director of Talent Development. The Workforce Council in the last couple of years has dedicated itself to helping to resolve the regional challenge of not having the talent to fill the jobs top to bottom, really, across the industry. And I'm heading up a brand new division at the Workforce Council. So excited to be a part of the panel. Thank you very much.
All right, great to have everyone here as a panelist. So I will go ahead and kick things off this morning with a few brief remarks. I wanted to really focus on the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And I'm going to boil the language in the Virginia Clean Economy Act down into really 5 key bullets. And the first one is the optimization for the utilization of local workers. That's one of the key items that was included in the statute as it advanced and was signed by the governor last year in 2020. Also, a broader statement that really references working to advance the economic benefits with capital investment in the Commonwealth, as well as job creation. Objective here and requirement to consult with various state agencies, and those agencies are Virginia Economic Development Partnership, the Chief Workforce Development Officer, and the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer in the Commonwealth, so that Dominion Energy could understand and align with the goals that they have for economic development and for workforce developments here in Virginia. A next and very key item, which we are spending a tremendous amount of time on, a tremendous amount of outreach, is apprenticeship and priority hiring for veterans, local workers, and workers from historically economically disadvantaged communities. And then we had an amendment to the Virginia Clean Economy Act that passed in 2021, which says Virginia and U.S. procurement were reasonably available and competitively priced. So those are the 5 key tenets of the Virginia Clean Economy Act that we're all very focused on and working on. So many of the groups here that you see, we've worked on really a 3-pillar approach. The first one is economic development, working with local, regional, and state economic development agencies to attract direct investment in Virginia. The second one is supply chain development, and that's really been focused on working with businesses in Virginia in preparation for participating in the offshore wind industry. And then the third is the workforce development effort, which has been very broad reaching with educational institutions and community groups and workforce councils. So since 2020, many of us have collaborated together here with 153 stakeholder meetings. To give you an idea how many attendees, it's a little over 3,500 attendees that we've had. And those range from everything from offshore wind European suppliers, trade delegations, and attendees at international trade conferences, to Virginia business organizations and businesses, and then of course our educational institutions and community organizations in the communities referenced in the Act as we go forward. So a pretty tremendous amount of activity. If you think about that, that's about 3 meetings at least. It's been a lot of work and coordinating efforts as we go forward. So soon, Dominion Energy will announce the awards for the major offshore wind providers for the project. And if you have recalled from a prior presentation, that will include foundations, transition pieces, turbine contracts, offshore substation, and transportation and installation. And then in 2023, we'll be announcing some of the onshore transmission infrastructure suppliers. So what that will enable is the identification of subcontracts for goods and services that these major offshore wind providers will source locally. So what is the content that they will source? And then as we identify that content, we can assess the jobs and pass those out via additional meetings with the same groups that I mentioned earlier, business organizations, businesses, colleges, and communities, and our high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. Also, recently, you may have seen an announcement that Dominion Energy and the North American Business Trade Union have completed a memorandum of understanding for CVOW. We will be working with the union to identify the roles that they will support, and most importantly, how we'll work together to meet the objectives of the Clean Economy Act. So very excited about that opportunity as well. So as I mentioned, we'll continue to work as we work with these major suppliers to get those scopes, and then from the scopes, we'll understand what jobs will need to be hired and get that information out. Dominion Energy will also be engaging in a number of miscellaneous contracts, and we will conduct ourselves in the same manner with the contracts that the company directly issues. And also Dominion Energy will be hiring approximately 130 employees for our own team as we move through construction and then to operations. So we're excited to be hitting these milestones and look forward to working with you as we move forward with the CVOW project. So I encourage you now to listen closely and carefully to the other panelists as they share more information about jobs and the outreach and the work that we'll continue going together. So Jeff, I'll turn this over to you now.
Oh, great. Thank you, John. Let me just share my screen here. And I just want to make sure, can all you see that title slide? Okay, great. Well, thank you, John, and thanks to the rest of the panelists for having me here this morning. Before I get into the guts, I just want to give a little bit of a perspective. This is a generational opportunity the country has right now. The 30 gigawatts of offshore wind, which the US federal government has set as a goal by 2030, is well in place. There's actually as much as 40 gigawatts now identified. This really means that there's going to be an $83 billion of CapEx being spent, and tens of thousands of new jobs. And these jobs are going to range, as I will quote my friend John Larson, everyone from someone that has a CDL to someone that has a PhD. The opportunity is enormous. And we are probably 25 years behind Europe in offshore wind, but we're going to have to catch up in 5 to 10 years. So the challenge is steep, the opportunities are huge, and it's just an exciting opportunity for Virginia to somewhat lead this effort. So let me sort of start by, as I mentioned in my introduction, we did a study for CVOW and for the Hampton Roads on looking at what the opportunity is. And we really think that your area has the opportunity to really be a leading offshore wind port, not just for the CVOW project, but really for the South Atlantic. And that is going to allow the area to compete with the larger markets like New York and New Jersey. And as John said, there's been lots of meetings with European companies. The feedback is that the area is ideal for setting up wind opportunities for these companies to make investments, capital investments, human investments, training investments, because with your ideal ports, strong Navy presence, et cetera, the area has the makings of a very good wind port. And what's interesting about the wind industry is it really doesn't exist right now. It's a nascent industry that's being created, but there's so much adjacency within the industries within Hampton Roads and the coastal Virginia area that with a small amount of training, these companies can take advantage of this large industry. The key in this, though, is really universal and a unified presentation of the supply chain, a unified presentation of the workforce development and capacities. And then it's important to align the workforce training in conjunction with project requirements. And the developers and OEMs want to be part of this process. And what I'm going to do a little bit later on in my discussion, I'm going to talk about sort of the timing of how a wind farm gets built, which sort of guides workforce training, job availability, and companies moving into the area to support offshore wind. So we went out and we talked to all the developers. And really what the developers say is their key concern and the thing that keeps them up at night is schedule. They have contracts with states to deliver power, and they have to meet those schedules. And they find that as a big risk. So their whole goal is to mitigate risk as they define and build out their projects. There's also an advantage to first movers coming in the industry. And I must say that your area has done great efforts in being a first mover in offshore wind, being open and being receptive to the needs of these large companies. Communications, critical element. John mentioned this in his talk with all the meetings that he's had. It is very important for the industry to be involved and for industries to be involved. We also find that it's quite interesting in that the states of North Carolina and Virginia and Maryland have a memorandum of understanding between the states on how to regionally develop offshore wind. We believe that's going to accelerate accelerate the development of the supply chain and accelerate the need for additional workforce. When talking with the OEMs and tier ones, and I'll sort of define that, those are the companies as John described, that own the major packages, own the foundations, own the installation, own a wind turbine itself. They need to support those same developers' timelines. So they have some of the same pressures that the developers have. They also look for line of sight. They look for the CVAL project. They look for the Kitty Hawk project. They look for others in the region and base their investment upon opportunity, not within a single project, but really to grow the entire industry. And some of the initial work, much of the initial work, like for example, I'm in Boston up in Vineyard Wind, is going to be all imported from European suppliers. That does not become sustainable in another couple of years. So these very large OEMs and tier ones are looking for places to invest, places to become entrenched in, places to train workers, hire workers, and move the industry forward. And the best way of doing that is matchmaking, where the local supply chain companies, the local workforce development programs are clearly aligned with what the OEMs and tier ones need. And there is matchmaking that's taking place within your area, which once again is that first mover advantage that I think is a critical in your long-term success. And really what that does is it's a communication of opportunity, but also the requirements of the OEMs and tier ones, what they look for, what they need, and also clearly what the supply chain has and what the supply chain can offer. So here's an interesting way that we looked at the supply chain. On the bottom of this graph, on the horizontal axis, are the major workflows of building a wind farm. And what we have within here is that the light blue are the number of companies that self-identified as being part of the supply chain when we began our study. We then went and we surveyed and dug into through stakeholder organizations to find those companies that had work that they were currently doing that is applicable in offshore wind. A simple example is someone that is welding ladders onto cellular tower poles can do the same thing on transition pieces. So finding those industries within the area that could support with a little bit of training, some pivoting, and some support. And what you really find out is that your area has a very robust supply chain. Not surprising because of the heavy Navy presence and shipbuilding presence, very strong in port and logistics, very strong in balance of plant and maintenance type of operations because that's being done on ships, and very strong on project management. So really what this says is that your area is just absolutely ideal for offshore wind, from an available workforce, from training operations, and from companies that can support the industry as it grows. Also, because you have an unencumbered access to the water, meaning no height restrictions, no bridges, etc., are real advantage for moving these very large pieces out into the wind farm. So from a physical standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a pre-existing standpoint, you are all in incredible shape. So what does this mean as far as jobs are concerned? And one of the things I think that is very important to understand is that basically a wind farm, from the time it gets permitted to the time it gets built, is a multi-year process. And there are various workflows that take place at various times leading up to the actual completion and commissioning of the wind farm. The chart we've taken here is looking at CVAL and its operations in 2026. And what this, we believe, does is it helps plan training programs, and it helps plan when employees are needed. The mistake that we don't want to see, or the situation we don't want to see come out, is that you're training individuals, people go through programs, they're certified, they're ready to go, but there's no jobs available. So as an example, training people that do blade maintenance and turbine inspection right now is probably not the best type of training, because those people won't be needed till after the wind farm is in fact commissioned. We also looked at type of jobs and the sort of the level of manager to non-skilled, and what sort of typically the training requirements are. That also gives a sense when people should start moving into the industry or start specializing. Now, the time frames that are on the right, the 5 years, et cetera, those are people that are probably already doing these jobs in other areas. So as you look for a managerial role, this is sort of just a way to sort of kind of sense the type of training that the OEMs and the tier ones and the developers are looking for. I think a key thing, and I'll talk about it a bit in a moment, is when is the peak number of jobs needed, or the peak number of people needed? That is typically in the construction, the manufacturing, and the installation phase. However, one must remember that maintenance and operation goes for 25 plus years. So there is a spike. So there is a spike of jobs a few years before the actual commissioning, but there are very many long-term jobs after. And one of the things that Hampton Roads has, and your area has, the Norfolk area has, is that because of your existing industries and the supply chain that I just talked about, those people that work, say, in the peak manufacturing or construction phase can move to do other wind farm projects out of the area as they become commissioned. And so we identified that there's really 625 different job roles to build and support an offshore wind farm. Now, I want to make really clear, those are not FTEs. Many of those jobs can transfer. For example, someone that does welding on a port upgrade can also do welding on transition pieces, et cetera. What this chart does, though, is it looks at when the bulk of these people are needed. So you will see with a 2026 commissioning date, which is the anticipated start of operations, that there is a 2.5-year period where there's lots of skilled specialists and standard labor needed. That's in the actual. That's when the wind farm is actually getting constructed. We think that this is really helpful in looking at when the jobs are going to be needed and the types of jobs that are going to be needed. Now, I want to make very clear here that the OEMs and tier ones, knowing that we have a nascent offshore wind industry in the US, are very willing, able, and open to any sort of sharing and training that they could do themselves. They want to be part of the success of the industry. They look at it as an industry, they look at it as an investment, and they will work very closely with adjacent supply chain companies. They will work very closely with training organizations, the work that Vernon's doing in his outreach, to ensure that they have a skilled, able-bodied labor force when they need them. So they are our partners in this journey. So people always say, well, okay, well, how many jobs is this really going to be long-term? So we've taken a cut of this and looked at jobs that would be in Hampton Roads, or jobs in Virginia. And these are FTEs created by year in order to support the wind farm and growth of the project. I'm sorry. And so we look at project spend, we look at how much is going to be spent, what the investment is going to be, and then we try to equate the number of jobs and do economic impact. This is very hard to plan. These numbers are, I will say, they are a very calculated guess, but they are not firm. But this is what we think the first phase of CVAL will generate as far as local employment. This does not take into account the areas supporting other offshore projects and the growth that may come out of that. So that's where the numbers get sort of squishy, but I wanted to at least give you a sort of sense of what the jobs are moving forward. And you see in the far right, the operations and maintenance jobs, when they kick in, those are jobs that will continue for decades. So, our conclusion about the workforce, our conclusion about the area is you guys are in a highly advantageous spot. You are really can be one of the epicenters of offshore wind growth. As the industry begins to develop, there are clusters forming. We think that your area is going to be one of the major cluster. One of the things that you really have as an advantage is you have a highly coordinated network of training institutions, colleges, university, industry associations, and are really adept at providing the programs that companies want, providing the high quality workforce that they want when they need them. Also, the adjacency of industries, such as those that work within, in support of the Navy, and also the matriculation out of the Navy, really gives you not only that workforce that's needed now, but that workforce that can build for the future. And as I said at the beginning, that generational workforce development as you focus on projects, not only CVAL, but other projects in the Atlantic. What's really important about this is you have to very clearly communicate with the OEMs, with companies, when the jobs are going to be needed. And so you can train people so there's a progression from training to let's say, internship to full-time employment that follows project schedules. So that is the work that's ahead of us. I can tell you from doing work up and down the East Coast, you are way ahead of other areas, and applaud you. And I want to thank you for giving me some time this morning. I hope that was very helpful. I will now turn the program over to Vernon, who could talk about his outreach and the programs that he's involved in. So thank you very much this morning, and I'll be around for questions after Vernon is done with his talk. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jeff. As previously mentioned, my name is Vernon Tillich, and I'm with the Hampton Roads Alliance. And we are working on building outreach strategies for offshore wind from the supply chain perspective, as well as from the workforce development perspective, alongside the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. As Jeff mentioned in his presentation, offshore wind is a generational opportunity. It's a brand new groundbreaking opportunity here in the United States. This CVAL project will be the first project that will be installed in federal waters and the largest offshore wind project in the United States once it's completed in the year 2026. This project is set to bring hundreds of new good paying jobs related to clean energy that will be producing millions of dollars in tax revenue, as well as hundreds of millions in economic economic benefits throughout the region and throughout the Commonwealth. The goal of the Hampton Roads Alliance working on this project is to build awareness and support for offshore wind and associated clean energy jobs and economic development in Hampton Roads and throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. So the question is, how are we doing this? How are we reaching out, and how can you all get involved? Well, we plan on, for the past over a year now, we've been reaching out to many different organizations such as K-12 educators, community colleges, universities, business organizations, and workforce business councils throughout the area to help identify, one, the jobs, but also how workers can get trained in these fields. Hampton Roads being a ideal location for offshore wind, we are home to the largest shipyard. We're also home to one of the largest ports on the East Coast. So we have the talent here. We just need to identify it, and we also need to cross-train, because a lot of the workers here in the region, many of them hold many of the certificates or qualifications that are needed for many of these offshore wind jobs. The job now is to bring awareness, but also to lead people in the right direction on getting the additional requirements or certifications needed to work in this offshore wind industry. So we are building and we are trying to build and also maintain meaningful connections amongst organizations, amongst community colleges, universities, businesses, faith-based organizations, civic leagues, Rotary clubs, everyone in Hampton Roads. As John had mentioned, in the Virginia Clean Economy Act, one of the requirements was to ensure job opportunities for veterans, as well as historically, economically disenfranchised communities. And so we can do that by reaching out to a lot of these community organizations. And that's what we've been doing. And we have also been working with the colleges. For example, ODU, Old Dominion University, their Center for Coastal Physical Oceanography and Open Seas Technology Innovation Hub have played a huge role in the CVAL project by helping to develop overall maritime strategies. TCC has been working very strongly on this project as well by helping to build a curriculum for renewable energy education that will prepare students for careers in design, installation, and maintenance for alternative energy. And in October 2020, the Mid-Atlantic Wind Training Alliance was announced by Governor Northam. This workforce training collaboration will help to certify people in the offshore wind industry for opportunities for the long-term development and maintenance of the wind power industry here in Hampton Roads. And so, as mentioned, there's going to be jobs for everyone from CDLs all the way to PhDs. And so nothing's too big and nothing's too small, but we're going to need organizations like you to help us get this word out. So we are looking forward to partnering with anyone that's willing in this sector to help bring awareness and to connect people with the proper trainings as well as the proper internships as they come about. We will be forming in the next couple of weeks a coalition of organizations for offshore wind. This coalition of organizations will be focused on helping to create outreach strategies, but also helping us to push the message out of offshore wind jobs, as well as offshore wind as a whole, to educate our community and our region on the economic impact and the opportunities that are surrounding offshore wind. For the last year, we have been meeting with civic groups, we've been meeting with faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and we've been getting a lot of good positive feedback, and we want to continue to build on that. So I want to encourage you all at the end of this webinar, you all should be receiving an email. And in that email, it would have information in regards on how you all can get in touch with people of the Alliance And please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Vernon Tillich. So all you have to do is send me an email. My email is actually vtillich@757alliance.com. Reach out to me and find out how we can connect with you or help us navigate to reach other people that may not know about these opportunities. And also I want to encourage you to please sign up for our newsletter. The Hampton Roads Alliance, we have a newsletter called The Latest Draft. And there you will find updates surrounding workforce development opportunities, surrounding supply chain opportunities around offshore wind. So I want to encourage you to please visit www.hamptonroadsalliance.com/offshore wind. And there you will find several updates. And as updates come available, all that information will be posted on that website for you all to take notice of. And also we'll send those out in the newsletter if you sign up, and those newsletters go out weekly. So please sign up for those. In addition to the work that I've mentioned, we've also started doing CVAL Friday forums. This is a new segment that we're doing called Workforce Wednesdays. And so every other month you will be you have an opportunity to go more in depth with us as we dig deeper into the workforce opportunities. And then every other month, we will be continuing to do the CVAL Fridays, focusing on the workforce development. So please stay posted to our website to learn more about our updates. And I look forward to connecting with you all. And please feel free to reach out to me as we try to continue to tell the story of offshore wind. Thank you. And I will pass it on now to Mr. Whitney Lester of the Hampton Roads Workforce Council.
Thank you, Vernon. As I mentioned earlier, I'm with the Workforce Council, and I thought that I would give everybody a little background on what we're doing in workforce development and how it relates to offshore wind and all that we've been talking about. So a couple of years ago, based on a study that was commissioned by the local community foundation, it became more than apparent that this region, like a number of other regions across the country, suffers from talent gaps in the talent pool. In particular, there are certain industries that have a more of a chronic issue, but really it's across all industries that we're suffering some sort of talent depletion, and that something needed to be done. The Workforce Council raised its hand, and 2 years later, we have a division with now 8 people working for it that is dedicated to with a regional approach to solving the talent challenge here in Hampton Roads. Based on a couple of grants that we got, we launched headlong into the largest economic driver in Hampton Roads in terms of industry, and that is the maritime industry. Now, the maritime industry is a very broad brush, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people, but we're sort of counting anything that touches the water as maritime. So it obviously begins with what this region does to support the Navy and the port, but shipbuilding, ship repair, it goes as far as bridge tunnel expansion, and certainly the ecosystem of supply chain. So there's a whole lot to it, and we have staff at the Workforce Council dedicated to solving the talent challenge in the maritime industry. Add offshore wind to this industry, and it was already an industry looking to solve some of these challenges, and with a looming series of jobs coming this way, it's something that we're getting out ahead of in advance so that we're prepared for it when it arrives. What we're doing in the talent division is somewhat novel in workforce development. Our organization has been around for 47 years, and now that we have merged the Hampton Roads Workforce Council and Southampton Roads with the Greater Peninsula Workforce Board on the Virginia Peninsula, we're the largest in the state. So we are tackling this with a novel approach, as I said, which is historically workforce development have been generally apprised of the jobs that are going to be needed, and have worked on the supply side, and have really gone to work finding job seekers and applying training and training funding so that if you build it, they will come. Build a supply base and then send them off into the world to go get those jobs. We've somewhat turned that on our ear and said, you know what, the smartest way that we can do this is to harness the demand signal and make it not only precise, but make it real time. Don't do a study again, but have dedicated staff who are in lockstep with those folks who are doing the work in the maritime industry, hiring managers, all the way up to the CEOs who see the vision for years to come. And our approach has been is and shall continue to be that once we have that demand signal, that clear sense of what is needed, then we can go forth and start doing what the Workforce Council has historically done, and also do a whole series of new programs in order to bolster the supply that's needed and make sure that as Jeff said, the talent, the training is aligned with what the OEMs and all the employers in the burgeoning industry will need, what the requirements of the jobs are. We want that to be completely aligned rather than guesswork. We don't want to be, as Jeff said, we don't want to be training people on things that won't be needed for a few years. We also don't want to be guessing as to what's going to be needed. We want that to be very precise. So like I said, there's a strong overlap between what will be needed, particularly in certain jobs within the offshore wind industry, and what the maritime industry already employs. So we want to find where we've got redundancies in a good way, where training programs can be applied within this industry. We also want to look at where job shortages already exist, and where or at least employee shortages, the talent shortage, and how we can go about bolstering the pool there. As Vernon mentioned, looking at the Workforce Council, we've always been looked out for really the entire region, top to bottom on socioeconomic strata. But it's important now more than ever when we look at talent, when we look at talent being strapped, and as I go meeting to meeting and business to business and even industry to industry, I haven't encountered one where people said, no, we're good, we're fine on talent, we don't have any challenges. So we are having to get more creative. We are having to turn over every rock, really. And sometimes, and one of our focuses is looking at previously popular subsets of the population that have previously not been looked at as heavily. And so we're looking at those near the poverty line. We're looking at people with disabilities. We're looking at previously incarcerated folks, and taking and looking at them through a new lens of this is the workforce, the emerging workforce of tomorrow, in addition to the emerging workforce that we've got working K through 12, and our next gen program, which is working with the youth of today, that's going to be our workforce of tomorrow. So we've got all these programs working in tandem, but again, we're getting a jump. Some of these jobs are years away. Some of them quite 3-4 years away, but we're looking at this now because we want to be this kind of a resource to employers in every stage as we go through. What we do, what we're doing for maritime is the systematic implementation of a proven talent pipeline management methodology. Starting with that demand signal, and then working through. There's a system to it, and we're happy to talk at length. I won't get too deep in the weeds on that today, but we've got a team and we've got an approach, and we're going to be doing the same in offshore wind. We're also going to be looking at internships. Internships are increasingly in high demand, and businesses in the industry say that they get peppered for requests for internships, and higher ed says it gets peppered for college students. There's also a need for internships that deviate from college students, but it's all requests flying all over the place, and we intend to be the hub. We intend to streamline, simplify it, so that there's really a proven system that folks on both sides can go through to get their needs met in a way that makes sense for everybody. So we're looking to revamp the region's internship web and become more of a hub. We're looking to also help work with employers to provide something that is loosely termed internship in a box, really for a 101 if you haven't done it before, or if you've done it, to enhance those efforts and really, again, be part of be part of a portal and an ecosystem that in order to do it more intelligently. So we're looking forward to doing more of that. And then the training piece, the Workforce Council's bread and butter for going on 5 decades has been the application of government funding into training opportunities. And that's still sort of, we call it the other side of the house of the Workforce Council. We're doing sort of things that the Workforce Council hasn't done before in the talent development, but we still rely on all that the strong departments that the council do to work with employers to defray costs of training and make sure that that the training can get done, it's applied intelligently, and it's where it needs to be going. So there's a whole lot happening. I think that probably covers as much as my branch of it's working on, but the message is that the Workforce Council has to be there as we stand up a new facet of the industry, if not a new industry itself. So we're along for the ride, and as John Larson will tell you, Dominion is one of the leaders in this charge and doing a terrific job. But it's not going to be Dominion that's making every hire by a long shot. This is a supply chain heavy endeavor. So we're going to be working with an array of employers, and we're happy to start talking now with employers. I will, before I jump off, I will say one of the most frequent questions I get, or series of questions I get, hey, Whitney, what jobs are going to be there when, and how much are they going to pay, and what are the requirements? And that is we'll get there. Today is probably not the day to get to that granular level of detail, but you saw the Xodus taxonomy. You saw that we're winnowing it down from what's projected on a very broad level down to something more precise as the years will go on, and we'll be there with the answers as we go further into this. So thank you for everyone's time. And again, we make ourselves at the Workforce Council available for any questions.
All right. Thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing the information about the project, the outreach, and really the collaborative effort towards really identifying and communicating the opportunities for men and women to join the clean energy workforce. And I think you can see that it's a tremendous amount of work that has already been undertaken. And we certainly are very respectful that we have many milestones ahead of us and look forward to those challenges and opportunities as we continue. I've got a couple of questions. You can type your questions in the Q&A or in the chat if you have those, but we had a couple that came in. The first one, Jeff, I will pass to you. When should we begin training for jobs specifically tied for offshore wind? And that's coming from a training institution here in the Commonwealth, one of the community colleges, as well as I'm sure it will apply to some businesses if they have on-the-job training programs, as well as our colleagues that would be union represented workers. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, thanks, John. My thoughts on that, as really sort of all of us, have said, as Whitney has said, Vernon has said, John has said, and I've said, it's about timing of workforce to project need and when jobs are becoming available. The chart that I laid out really talks about when the activity in a wind farm takes place. And so it's very important to work with the OEMs, the developers, the package suppliers, which, as John described, are the people that are going to be managing major portions of the wind farm development. Work with them on when they need workers, and then train accordingly. As I said, like the training of operations and maintenance people probably shouldn't take place for a couple of years. The training of people that will be involved in the construction should probably start training fairly quickly. So it really is a matter of looking at the scope of work, looking at the workflow, and then determining training programs in order to support that workflow when jobs are needed. So there's no right answer. The training is all dependent upon project need. And as John said, once they announce the major suppliers, they will have schedules. Those schedules will help determine when the workforce is needed.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Whitney, I will ask you, when do you foresee companies, you mentioned internships, offering internships for some of the offshore wind positions?
That's a great question. We have yet to be approached by anybody for internship guidance in the in the offshore wind industry. My guess is that the jobs will come first and the internships will follow. Sometimes they go hand in hand, and before you can get stood up entirely, you want an intern that's going to help you along the way. But we have yet to really have any discussions with anybody about internships. So my guess is we're a little ways off. We're going to be coming up with sort of the baseline guidance for companies on internships, and as we start talking more about offshore wind, we're also going to be the ones that are sharing those internships and making sure that they're out there on portals that everybody can find and that they're marketed better than they ever have been before.
All right, thank you, Whitney. We have a question that has come in regarding really IT and cybersecurity for offshore wind industry, and let me speak to that. There is a tremendous role for IT and cybersecurity. I'll say a tremendously important role for that. If you think about the technologies that are being deployed offshore, there will be a high degree of instrumentation as well as automation for coordination of up to 180 turbines operating offshore. And of course, that information will come back into the operations and controls center. Data will be analyzed, decisions will be made on preventative maintenance as well as other activities that undergo. So cybersecurity, if we look at a layer of that on top, is paramount. These will be important generating assets and will be treated just as any other generating asset connected to the electric transmission grid. So there will be opportunities with regards to analysts and leadership in the cybersecurity space as we move forward. And that will be incorporated in with Dominion Energy's current efforts as far as that goes. Let's see here. There's a question. I just want to make sure that we hit this again. And another item is, when will information be available about the types of suppliers, as well as eventually, as those scopes are identified, what the career opportunities and business opportunities are? Is we announce the major contracts that I outlined at the beginning of the presentation and work with these key suppliers. We will then be able to work and coordinate information, as Vernon had mentioned, to conduct outreach with the business community for supply chain development, as well as colleges, K through 12 schools, private schools, and community colleges to get that information out in coordination with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council and the Hampton Roads Alliance. So that information will be coming about in 2022 so that everyone will have the opportunity to get that information. Have them. I see that there's a question here with respect to union affiliation and the high rotor union affiliation with some different programs, and have these been considered in the talent gap planning strategy. So I'll speak to the fact that Dominion Energy and the North American Building Trades Union just announced that MOU. We will be working with the unions to identify those jobs that the unions can support for the CVAL project, and then work with them on the programs that they have today or that they may create to support the offshore wind industry. Jeff, question here. What type of opportunities would be available for environmental aspects of the project? Monitoring, consulting, those types of things.
That's a great question. And those types of aspects are used right from the time there's a lease area to after the wind farm is in maintenance. One thing, and I will speak about the Block Island wind farm, being a Rhode Islander myself. There, for example, is a yearly inspection of the environmental impact that wind farm is having upon the sea life around it, around bird migration, mammal migration. So there's that aspect. There's also the aspect as wind farms begin to be laid out in a grid and the grid is submitted. That is all based upon seabed analysis and environmental impact studies. So there is a need for that activity, environmental monitoring, at all phases, from the beginning a lease area is even conceived right through decommissioning. And so that is very consistent. That is a very consistent service required by both the federal government, in many times state government, and also by the operator of the wind farm itself.
All right, thank you, Jeff. There's a question on how can workers apply for these jobs. So I think there are two important aspects for individuals to make it known they're interested in participating in the offshore wind industry. First and foremost, Dominion Energy at careers.com, Dominion Energy. You can go to Dominion Energy at dominionenergy.com and find that as a tile on the page. Can sign up and express their interest. So basically, you can review jobs that are available, but more importantly, you can complete a profile and indicate what roles you're interested in. And as those jobs post that have those keywords in it, then you would receive a notification of a job that's available there. Secondarily, the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, a recommendation in the Xodus study that Jeff and his team put together, was that there be a central website in the Commonwealth for individuals to express their interest in offshore wind. So you can go to the workforcecouncil.org/offshore wind / and you can register there that you have an interest in participating in a clean energy career in offshore wind. And as we move forward, there's a couple of key items that are important for that. We will conduct obviously the typical construction exposition so that businesses have the opportunities to find their ability and opportunity to participate in the project. And then we will also have career days in which we will be inviting individuals that have registered at Dominion Energy, as well as those that have registered on the Workforce Council's website, to come and meet with those companies who are selected as subcontractors for the project. So it's very important that individuals get their names on those lists so that they can receive notifications. And in addition, we'll be moving forward with the community outreach that Vernon has outlined so that we can spread the word through the communities as well. So I'll call it a multi-channel approach as we go forward, but we encourage register their interest in becoming an offshore wind worker. Our hour here. Would really like to thank you for your participation today in the session, and continue to follow both the Hampton Roads Workforce Council and the Hampton Roads Alliance as we move forward with Friday forums and Workforce Wednesdays to stay abreast and receive newsletters and information as that comes about. So once again, thank you today for participating. And it's been our pleasure as a group of panelists to share this information.